Picture it. You kneel at the edge of a cold Sierra stream, tilt a shallow pan into the current, and when the water clears, there it is, a bright bead of gold sitting in the black sand. You didn't inherit it, you didn't earn it, you just reached down and picked it up. That image pulled roughly 300,000 people across oceans, deserts, and mountains between 1848 and the early 1850s. And here is the number that should stop you cold. Close to $2 billion in gold, and the money of the day was clawed out of California in those years, a fortune large enough to reshape a nation. Now the twist. The men who actually owned the mines that produced that gold were, over and over again, the last people in line to keep any of it. Because a gold mine was never really a way to find money. It was a machine for spending it, a bet that the mountain would pay you back before it broke you. And for most of the people who owned one, the mountain never did. I'm going to show you the single most expensive thing about owning a gold mine. It wasn't the equipment, it wasn't the labor, it was a courtroom in the year 1884 that could make your entire fortune illegal in a single afternoon. We'll get there, but first, the question that runs underneath this whole story. If the gold was lying in the rivers practically for free, and $2 billion of it came out of that ground, where did all of that money actually end up? Because I promise you, it was not in the pocket of the man holding the pan.
It begins in January of 1848, in a sawmill on the American River, in a place called Coloma. A carpenter named James Marshall, building a mill for a Swiss landowner named John Sutter, notices flakes of metal glinting in the tail race. Within a year, the news has crossed the continent and jumped 2 oceans. By 1849, they have a name, the 49ers. And California is changing faster than any place in American history. Its non-native population explodes from around 14,000 to 250,000 people in barely 4 years. Here is the crucial thing to understand about the asset at the center of this story. In the beginning, a mine was not a shaft or a tunnel or a machine. It was a claim, a stretch of stream bed a man marked out, defended, and worked with his own 2 hands. The gold was already loose in the gravel, ground out of the mountains by 10,000 years of moving water. You didn't have to break it out of solid rock. You only had to separate it from the sand. And that single fact rewrites the entire economics. When the raw material is lying on the ground for free, the only thing standing between a man and a fortune is cost. The cost of getting there, the cost of staying alive, the cost of the tools, the cost of his own time. Whoever controlled those costs controlled the gold, and it almost never was the miner. So hold 2 things in your head for the next 15 minutes. The mystery, who actually walked away rich, and the promise, that 1884 courtroom waiting at the end of this story that turned working minds into worthless holes overnight. Let's open the books.
Start with the claim itself, because this is the part that sounds like a miracle. In the earliest years, the land wasn't really anyone's. There was no functioning government out there, no deeds, no fees. Miners wrote their own rules in each district. You could hold as much ground as you could personally work, and no more. So the claim, the actual asset, the thing this entire video is supposedly about, was very nearly free. That is the trap. The claim was free. Everything else was not. To reach California in 1849, you either sailed around the tip of South America 5 to 8 months at sea, or you crossed the fever-ridden Isthmus of Panama, or you walked 2,000 miles across the plains. However you came, you arrived exhausted, half broke, and standing in the single most expensive small town on Earth. Because prices in the goldfields did not obey normal rules. When thousands of desperate men chase a fixed pile of food and tools, the sellers set the price. A single egg could cost $1, and $1 in 1849 was closer to 30 or 40 in today's money. Flour, coffee, boots, whiskey, a dry place to sleep, every one of them marked up to the ragged edge of what a hungry man would pay. The gold you pulled from the river at dawn was often gone by nightfall, spent on the simple privilege of being there to pull out more tomorrow. And the work itself was brutal.
You stood knee-deep in snowmelt for 12 hours, swirling a pan or rocking a wooden cradle, sifting ton after ton of gravel for a few glinting specks. In a genuinely good week, on rich ground, early, a man might clear more than he'd earn in a year back home. That is the number the newspapers printed. That is the number that emptied entire towns in Missouri and Maine. But averages are cruel, and they arrive fast. The richest, easiest gravel, the kind a lone man could work with a pan, was skimmed off in the first couple of seasons. After that, every new arrival competed for thinner ground against more people. Within a few years, the average 49er was earning less than a common laborer made back east, without the ocean voyage, the dollar eggs, and the dysentery, and the mountain winters. Most of them did not strike it rich. Most of them, if they were honest, would have been better off staying home. The pan was a story about freedom. The ledger told a different story, and the men who read the ledger first were about to become the richest people in California.
Meet Sam Brannan. He was already in San Francisco when the first rumors drifted down from Coloma, and he did something that tells you everything about who actually won the gold rush. He did not run to the river. He ran to the stores. Quietly, he bought up every pan, every pick, every shovel he could lay hands on. And only then did he stride through the streets of San Francisco, holding a bottle of gold dust over his head, shouting that there was gold on the American River. He wasn't sharing the news. He was manufacturing his customers. The story goes that Brannan bought metal pans for around 20 cents and sold them to the stampeding crowd for as much as $15 apiece. He never once knelt in a freezing river. He became, by most accounts, California's first millionaire, and he did it selling shovels to men who dreamed of gold. That is the pattern beneath the entire gold rush, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The reliable money was never in the ground. It was in the men who came to dig it out. Every miner needed food, tools, clothes, liquor, transport, and somewhere to lose his earnings on a Saturday night. Every one of those needs was a business, and every one of those businesses collected the gold the moment it left the river.
A young dry goods merchant named Levi Strauss understood this too. He came to San Francisco in the 1850s not to mine, but to sell to miners, and the fortune that eventually carried his name was never dug out of any claim. It was stitched. He sold the miners the one thing they wore out fastest, their clothes. Butchers, bankers, boarding house keepers, laundrymen, saloon owners, freight haulers, they formed a tightening ring around every mining camp, and the gold flowed out of the gravel and straight through them. The miner was not the winner in this economy. The miner was the product. He was the engine that hauled wealth out of the earth so that everyone standing around him could take a cut before it ever reached his pocket. But here is where the story turns dark, and where owning a mine stops being a man with a pan and becomes something far more dangerous to your money.
The loose gold in the streams was finite, and it went fast. Within a few years, the easy pickings were gone, and the gold that remained was locked away, buried in ancient gravel high in the hills or trapped inside solid quartz deep underground. And you cannot get that gold with a pan and a strong back. You get it with capital. Enormous, terrifying amounts of capital. This is the moment the mine becomes the thing we picture today, and the exact moment the lone prospector is quietly priced out of his own dream. Two monsters replace him. The first is hydraulic mining. If the gold is spread through an entire hillside of gravel, you simply destroy the hillside. Miners built giant iron nozzles called monitors and blasted the mountains apart with jets of water powerful enough to kill a man at 100 feet, washing whole slopes down through sluices to catch the gold. It was breathtakingly effective. It was also a capital project on the scale of a railroad, because to fire those water cannons, you needed water, colossal amounts of it, delivered under pressure from miles away. Companies dug hundreds of miles of ditches and threw towering wooden flumes across canyons. Some of those water systems cost more to build than the gold their mines ever produced.
The second monster is hard rock, or quartz mining. When the gold is locked in stone, you sink shafts and tunnels deep into the mountain, haul the ore up, and feed it into stamp mills, thundering banks of iron hammers that pound rock into powder, day and night.
Then you mix that powder with mercury to pull the gold free. This is not a claim a man works. This is a factory. It needs engineers, machinery, timber, fuel, wages for dozens of men, and a river of cash flowing in every single week for months or years before a single ounce of gold might flow out. And that is the fork in the road that ruins people. The pan and cradle miner risked his time and his health. The mine owner, the one who incorporated, raised money, bought the machines, hired the crews, risked something far larger. He risked the whole fortune up front on a bet whose bottom he could not see.
Here is the expensive part. Here is the line the newspapers never printed beside the nuggets. A gold mine was the only business on Earth where you paid the full cost of building the business before you found out whether you had one. Think about what that actually means. You sink your shaft, you build your mill, you dig your ditches, raise your flumes, and put 40 men on the payroll. You spend a fortune, and the mountain owes you nothing. The vein you were chasing can pinch out to nothing 20 feet down. The ore can turn out too poor to pay for the mercury it takes to process it. The rich quartz can simply stop with no warning, leaving you standing in a very expensive hole, holding a very empty ledger. For every celebrated mine that made its owners rich, there were many more that swallowed every dollar their investors put in and gave back nothing. Owning a mine wasn't a way to get rich. It was a lottery ticket that cost as much as a factory. But the deepest cost, the one that makes this the most expensive thing in the whole history of American mining, was never written on any owner's books at all. It was the bill that came due later. And it came due in two ways.
The first was the mercury. To pull the gold out of all that crushed rock and gravel, the industry poured mercury into its sluices by the ton and lost millions of pounds of it into the rivers of the Sierra Nevada. That mercury did not leave. It is still there, in the mud of California's streams and reservoirs, working its way into the fish more than a century and a half later. The owners took their gold and walked away. The bill for the poison was simply handed to the future. And the second was the one I promised you at the very start, the law. In 1884, a federal judge named Lorenzo Sawyer ruled on the mountains of debris that hydraulic mining had been flushing down onto the farms and towns of the valley below. In a single decision, he made it illegal to dump that debris into the rivers, which, in practice, made large-scale hydraulic mining itself illegal. Overnight, companies that had sunk immense fortunes into monitors, ditches, and 100-mile flumes watched their entire operations turn worthless in an afternoon. The single most expensive thing about owning a gold mine turned out to be a risk that appeared on no balance sheet in the world. The chance that the public would decide your fortune wasn't worth the wreckage, and that the courts would agree. Close to $2 billion in gold came out of that ground in the rush years, and the men who sank fortunes into owning the mines that produced it were again and again the last people in line to keep any of it.
So let's settle the account. There were 4 seats at the table of the gold rush. There was the lone miner, who traded his health for an average return worse than a job back home. There was the merchant, who never lifted a shovel and got rich selling them. There was the mine owner, who bet a factory's worth of capital against a mountain that owed him nothing. And there was the land itself, left scarred and poisoned, holding a bill nobody agreed to pay. The romance was always aimed at the first seat, the man with the pan, but the money sat in the second. The reliable, boring, unglamorous fortune of the gold rush belonged to whoever sold the eggs, the shovels, the whiskey, and the trousers. The house always won, and in California, the house wore an apron. And the mine owner, the man we started this story picturing as the winner, the boss, the tycoon on the hill, he was, more often than not,
the customer who paid for everyone else's fortune. He funded the merchant. He funded the mercury cleanup that arrived a century later. He funded the courts that eventually shut him down. He owned the gold mine. That was exactly the problem.
If your picture of history just quietly rearranged itself, if you'll never look at a prospector the same way again, then do the one thing that keeps this channel digging. Subscribe. And tell me in the comments which seat you would have taken. Because next time we leave the mountain for the arena. We've looked at owning a hole in the ground. Now we're going to look at the most disturbing asset a person could ever put on a balance sheet: other human beings. A Roman gladiator school, where the owner didn't merely risk his money on the men who fought for him. He owned them. He fed them, trained them, insured them, and priced their deaths down to the coin. The economics of that will change how you watch every sword you've ever seen on a screen. This is Owning History, where history opens its account books.